devastating. Obviously, the loss of life trumps a lot, but there are a lot of businesses out of business today.
And there's social damage, Brett, that follows from an economic recession or even depression. Look, I think this is touch and go. And I think we're going to enter a situation, since even though testing is up and testing has been increased and we are conducting a lot of tests, it's not where it needs to be in order to have full control and suppress this virus. So that means we're in for a period of experimentation, touch and go, and I think a long road ahead.
All right, panel, thank you very much. When we come back, the brighter side of things, some good news in hard times.
Special report.
Hey, Janet, can you hear me?
More than 150 years of
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah, somebody's got to mute their TV behind them.
Yeah, my husband. I don't know why it did that, because I just went to where I scheduled the meeting. It says 7 o'clock. I don't know why when you click on the link, it says 10.
I know that happened last time to you too. I don't know why that is.
How did you
You'll
just,
have to look at that for future meetings.
what did you just do to get in?
I just signed in, like, I went to the email, and then I clicked on the link, and then I signed. Yeah.
I clicked on the link from the agenda, and it said meeting doesn't start till 10. I'm like, holy crap, hold up. But
Okay, so Janet, what we're gonna do in this meeting is just kind of.
Hold on. We're not going to start talking until everybody gets here.
No, I know. That's okay. I just want to say something. We're going to verbally just say what we want, like basically what was in our emails, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because it doesn't have to be a long meeting. It just has to be like us verbally saying it.
No, but I got a couple other things I got to talk about that
Okay.
developed.
All right.
That is very bizarre what just happened. I hope everybody else can get in.
Yeah, they can all get in.
Who's that?
Everyone should be able to get in.
Lindsay.
What else are we talking about so I can be prepared?
That Mother's Day thing we need to talk about. Lindsay, how did you get in? Did you get the same message we got?
ID. Once you start it, it doesn't matter what time it is.
Okay. Yeah. But when I went to where I set it up,
Yeah.
it did say 7 o'clock. That was very bizarre.
Maybe it's in like Pacific time. That sometimes happens with Zoom. I use Zoom for work.
I didn't even touch any of that. I left it the way what Alicia said to set them up, and I don't touch that, but maybe it did something on its own.
Ah.
It's got a mind of its own. Who else we got here? Okay.
Janet, can we try to keep this meeting down to a minimum of time?
Yes, we can. This is not my idea of fun either. So yes.
Yeah, no, just because I have to do something, and
I didn't think it was that necessary, but we need to follow the rules. So
right. So let's just kind of, this is what I want to say. Let's just kind of like state what we wanted to state in our emails about this wine thing. I think that's why we have this tonight, correct?
that
Like
is
if
correct.
you want to just go around and I can read pretty much Reader's Digest what I said, and everyone else can do the same thing. Let's try to, can we just try
That
to?
was the plan, Cheryl. Okay, that's the
Yeah.
plan. Let me just get everybody on here, and then we can talk about it, because I'm not starting a meeting without everybody being here.
Right, but I think it's important to have to have this done within 45 minutes.
If you need to leave in 45 minutes and you're done, then you can leave. If we're not done, we're going to finish what we have.
Okay, perfect. Who's missing?
Maggie and Carol. I don't know if our new member is going to join us tonight or not. I sent him the agenda.
They have 2 minutes anyways.
Yeah. Where's the baby?
She's in bed.
Oh, nice. So early.
Wow, good for you, and it's still daylight.
I know. I just filled her up and John just put her to bed. I heard her make a noise, but working is interesting, but it's actually not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just started work again last week was my first week back, but Not terrible.
Oh,
Yeah. We're making it work. Luckily, John's home still. So, do what you got to do. Everybody has their kids home. It's like chaos on conference calls.
oh, I bet.
But I guess you get to know people better, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a person too. You're not just a robot.
Antonio has joined. Where is he? Hi, Antonio. Is he on? Are you on?
Looks like he's waiting for his audio to connect.
Okay.
Yep.
I think that this Zoom thing is okay, but everybody keeps saying WebEx is better. I've participated in. No, you don't think it is?
No.
Oh, because most people who've used it have said they prefer it. But
It's like everybody's moving to Zoom. WebEx was I don't know, quirky. You would lose connection, and Zoom's better.
yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We still need Maggie and I hope they're not running into problems with that thing. Oh, no, here we go. There's Maggie. Please do come in, Maggie. Yeah, connecting to audio. All right, Antonio, can you hear me now? I can't hear you. What's going on here?
He's muted.
No, oh, I thought I unmuted you. Okay, there you are.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, I still can't hear him.
He might have to unplug his earbuds
Oh, maybe.
from the computer.
There's-
I don't know. That shouldn't matter though, right, Lindsay?
No.
How about now, Antonio?
I can hear you fine. Can you
Oh,
hear
I
me?
couldn't hear you. There you are. Howdy, neighbor.
Howdy, how are you?
Welcome, Antonio. This is Cheryl. Welcome to the club.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, we've got Carol's the only one missing. Okay, we'll give her a few more minutes and then we'll start. So I don't know if you know why we're here tonight, Antonio. This is a special meeting just to get our input on the draft regulations for farm, brewery, cideries, wineries, and distilleries.
Yes, I read the information you emailed me.
Okay, so once we get going,
We should start. The meeting starts at 7. I think we have to respect everyone else's time.
all right, so let's do roll call. Lindsay Herzig,
Here.
here. Maggie Bascom, Linda Torres,
Here.
Errol Selva,
Here.
and Antonio, pronounce your last name before I murder it.
Almodovar.
Okie dokie. Oh, there we go. Somebody's coming. Oh, where'd they go? All right, so it's 7:02. We'll start the meeting. I should have done that before I said roll call, but anyway. I wanted to add one little amendment to the agenda that popped up kind of after we prepared it. Laura, this is not really something we need to vote on, but I want to discuss the Mother's Day promotion that Laura wants us to participate in. Who is, oh, there's Carol. I'll add that to the agenda. And if you all approve that amendment, I make a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment to it. Do I hear a motion?
I motion to approve it.
And I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No? Okay. All right, so we'll get right to that. I had asked you all to prepare something in writing that you will send on your own behalf to Robin and the board, planning and zoning, and Jen. I guess you could just send it to Jen Keough and she will forward it to all of them.
Does it have to be in a Word document or can we just email?
I guess you could just put it in the body of the email. They didn't specify how to do it. So I think what prompted this, just to give you a little background, there was a planning and zoning meeting last Wednesday. Last Wednesday,
The 15th.
the 15th. And there was a discussion about this, and there were actually several people present at the meeting who really want to start a farm winery. And I had asked a few questions of Robin, and I asked a question about breweries in the industrial area, and she said that they've had inquiries to that as well. So I did ask her as a favor to us, when there are such inquiries and other types of things that affect economic development, to keep us in the loop. So I think that's why that email was sent out to us for our input. And it doesn't have to be a collective opinion. We all have our own opinions. That's why I was trying to stress, you all can write something and send it in. So we can start now if you'd like, reading what you have. And I think just by us all reading what we have, it might make us all think a little bit more. Maybe we want to adjust what we've already written once we send it, you know, if there's that type of influence. So Cheryl, go ahead. You can go first.
Okay, I'm just going to reiterate what I put in the email. I know that one of the contention was the 10-acre mandatory acreage. I don't know, maybe we compromise and do 7.5 as a suggestion. So that was that one. As far as lighting, I remember when we did the football field at the high school, one of the major problems was the height of the light poles, because they were spilling over into the neighborhood. So that put a really big hitch in the giddy up, if you will. So I think we have to talk about that, unless they already know that and they have that on their list of things to check out. As far as signage, I noticed that they only had one sign as approved. I don't know that that would be enough. I would think you would need more signage. I don't know what the more signage would be, but I just think that that should be talked about, just to make sure that whoever's going to be doing the winery, brewery, what have you, is okay with one sign. And also, is there going to be a sign on Route 17? A lot of these breweries do have signs on like a main drag. Is that something that is going to happen? Number of events allowed per weekend, per week, so that as to not impact the lives of the residents. And keep in mind, like this stuff, if I was opening up a brewery or winery, I would want to know this stuff up front if I had any restrictions. So if I could only have 2 or 1 event on the weekend, if I was going to have events, I just think that should be discussed, so there's no surprises. The building design, are there restrictions? Will it be in keeping with the standards held with the town? We all know what that is, but just so that whoever is coming in knows the building design might be an issue, if it's going to be. Hours of operation, and a lot of this is obvious, and I'm sure it's already on there, but just so any restrictions on the hours of operation, and just full transparency on a lot of these issues from the town and what the committees would approve. And I guess that's our goal, is so that we have a good reputation of businesses coming in, and all this upfront work is done, so there isn't this back and forth when we get too deep into it that will turn someone off in a way. That's it.
Okay. I would suggest that you put that in writing, and actually some of the questions that you have, you might just want to pose them as you just posed to us. There may actually be answers to those already.
Right.
All right, who wants to go next? Maggie, you want to go? Or Lindsay? Who's going? Lindsay, go ahead.
Mine's short and sweet. I was okay with the 10, but Cheryl, I like all of your points, and I feel like all of those need to be outlined in that draft document that they send. I forget what it's called, but I'll ask some of the same questions to see what kind of answers we can get and make sure that they're in there, so there's no guessing.
Can I interrupt for a moment? I thought if you like scrolled all the way to the bottom of the draft, I thought those things were taken care of there, or it points you to somewhere where there is regulation about that.
Maybe you're right, because it did reference a document.
Yeah, I referenced, that's, I thought a lot of it was part of the agricultural event. it covers that there.
Yeah, I don't even know where to go to reference that, so I guess I'll ask that question too.
The
I
agricultural
mean,
events?
it looks like it's all there.
Which one are you referring to? Robin's regulations, the proposed regulation?
The final draft document that you sent to us to review and comment on.
The one, the last part of it is application requirements. Is that what you're referring to, or no?
Hold on, I don't have it in front of me.
I know, I'm gonna pull it up now too.
Well, a lot of this stuff is on the Planning and Zoning's website. That's where a lot of these links that I had on the agenda gives you more information. It actually gives you,
Yeah, look at the document that says the final draft.
Yep,
Go all the way to the bottom of that document.
I'm there.
Thank you, Antonio.
Okay, I'm there.
So you should see a lot of the points that Cheryl was just asking about is covered.
Yes, they're quite, yes, her points are on here or mentioned in some way.
Or mentioned in some way, so it would link back to something.
I think the agricultural events regulations will come into play with this as well. I'm a little unclear on that.
Well, Joe's on the line if you want to ask Joe.
Joe, you there?
Yes, I'm there. Yeah, so a couple of, well, I guess I'll start with the agricultural event
Yeah.
regulation that was passed. If an applicant for the farm breweries, cidery, wineries decides they would like to hold events, then they would have to apply, put an application in for our event regulation and go through that approval process for events that they would want to hold.
Right, but that's, just to jump in, that's what I was kind of saying. Instead of, applicant proposing hours, why wouldn't we specify that so it's clear?
Well, in the draft regulation that you guys have,
Yeah,
on the, I believe it would be, excuse me, the second page, and it would fall under 12.14.04. Item number 1, applicant shall propose hours of operation. So as part of their application,
Yeah.
for a farm brewery, they would provide us with the hours of operation that they're proposing.
Uh-huh.
And if the commission deemed them to be acceptable, then they would be approved. If they were asking for something that the commission deemed would be unacceptable, we would modify the hours of operation.
yeah, no, that makes sense. I was just saying, why wouldn't we, or we as a town, right? Why wouldn't we say, here's the hours you can operate within?
Well, that was talked about, but it was chosen not to do it that way.
Gotcha.
But if you would like in your comments,
Oh, yeah.
certainly comment that if you're, as an individual or collectively, you think that we should be establishing hours, certainly give us that feedback.
All right, cool.
Yeah, I think that the town and the committees probably have ideas of what they would approve and not approve. I think we should be transparent with that. And also events that we would approve and not approve as well. I just feel like to get too far into it with a prospective business person without stating some of these things that we already know that they don't know to ask, maybe we should, like, we're not going to have a music fest, or I'm not saying that we wouldn't, but I just feel that we get into trouble because everything's so broad, and then we start tightening it up really tight, and that's when things go south. And as far as the lighting, it says adequate lighting, but one of the issues when you're doing something like this, from my experience, is the height of the poles for the light, and I don't see that in here. I see adequate lighting, but the height and the spillage of the light would definitely be a problem for neighbors, and we should determine that, maybe?
I don't know if that can be a one size fits all. I would think that depends on where the property is.
Well-
That's a good question, and it might have to be taken on a farm by farm basis.
Yeah,
Like
'cause
if you're out in the middle of nowhere with no really close neighbors, you may have a different lighting situation. You may have,
Well, it's pretty unbelievable how light spills over, like for the football field. They wanted really high lights, I guess, poles, and the spillage was going quite far. I don't know all the details. Joe, maybe you do, but I just remember that being a pretty big issue.
yeah, well, I would definitely put that in your recommendations. It's a good point, and I'm sure you're not the only one thinking about it.
In the draft, it does state in the last section, application requirements, that adequate lighting shall be provided in all parking and pedestrian areas, but no light shall shed beyond the boundaries of the subject property. So I understand exactly what you're saying, that maybe the height of the lights should be something that's defined in advance so they know that they can't exceed a certain height limit.
Right. Maybe if that could be figured out.
Joe? Joe, are you still there?
Yes,
Joe, it's Carol. In the P and Z regulations now for commercial buildings, there is a height requirement, correct? That the buildings cannot exceed?
well, there's a general regulation for the town that nothing can exceed a height of 35 feet.
Okay, so is there something in the regulations about the lighting poles?
Well, it would be considered a structure, so it would fall under that same 35-foot height restriction. And that was the issue with the football field and the lighting there, because the lighting poles for those type of facilities are much, much higher, almost double.
Right, yeah, that's what I thought. So that's what I wanted to know, if it fell into that height requirement. Do you remember, I know that the lights on Main Street that Eversource put in, was there a height requirement on those? Do you remember?
I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, I think there was, back then, if I can remember, there was some discussion about that. At the time, I think I was in the garden club.
I think there was also, Cheryl, because I remember, my brain, I'm trying to think back that far. I remember homeowners complaining about the height and that the light shining into their second floor windows.
Yes, absolutely. I remember that too. So I don't know, I remember that.
So that might be something that the building department would have on record as a reference. I mean, if they can only go up that 35 feet and the poles, can't go up that high, there might be a restriction already on the books, but I don't know.
Well, it seems like you all agree that that should be something that should be looked into. So again, I would suggest that in your, what you send to Robin, I would include that. Anybody else want to give their point of view? Who went? Okay, Maggie, go.
I hate to be the curmudgeon of the group, but I think that 10 acres is too low for many reasons. I also think that I think too many properties in the town have a 10-acre lot available, and I think that we're kind of opening up a can of worms. I also think that it needs to be more specific with the amount of crop that should be grown within that acreage. We're talking about farm breweries, wineries, and cideries. So if we're talking about an agriculture type of establishment, we should be really clear. And I hate to be, like I said, the curmudgeon and not be supportive of business, but I think that we're opening up a can of worms with the proposed document the way that it is, and allowing establishments within neighborhoods that aren't really set up for this type of infrastructure. I think that on a farm and on an agricultural standpoint, there should be specifications as to the amount of crop that should be grown for that product on site. And I also think that we should be thoughtful and strategic. We have a lot of windy roads in town that aren't really the best lit. So they should be kind of whatever property, the property that is going up for approval should have access to either a highway road or a collector road to keep people off of these windy back end roads that a lot of people don't have experience potentially driving.
Okay, thanks, Maggie.
That's a great point, Maggie.
Let's see, who hasn't gone, Linda?
I'm just gonna, it's probably just easier if I just read what I wrote. Let's see. I've reviewed the final draft regulation for farm breweries, cideries, wineries, and distilleries. I'm requesting that you reconsider the minimum lot size of 10 acres and instead make it a minimum of 5 acres. Based on the points made at the April 15th P&Z meeting by the 2 young entrepreneurs who are considering Durham as their home for their new venture, a 10-acre minimum seems excessive, especially since not all of the ingredients need to be grown on site. 5 acres might seem to be on the small side, but 7, 8, or 9 acres may not be out of the question to accommodate the necessary building and parking depending on the scope of the proposed endeavor. Please also consider that the opinions of RiverCog and the Regional Agriculture Council, which Planning and Zoning actively solicited, also state that a 10-acre minimum is too restrictive. If we want to make Durham an attractive alternative to the multitude of existing communities already catering to these agribusinesses, we need to make sure we are on par or even more inviting than the competition. That's it.
Does anyone know what the acreage is for some other towns like ours? I could have found that out, but I just thought of it. Is it more than 10 acres? Or like what's working for other towns that are similar to ours with this, as far as the size of the?
I didn't look it up, but it seems like based on RiverCog and the Agriculture Commission there, if they're thinking it's too restrictive, then we've got to think that it's under 10 is what the recommendation is. I don't know what other towns have, but.
Okay.
In the RiverCog document, they state that the town of Lyme has a regulation based on a 6-acre property with 2 acres attributed to dwellings. So apparently Lyme is going with the less than 10 acres.
Right.
To know what the rest of that regulation is for Old Lyme. That was kind of a tease in there, and I wish I tried to find it on Old Lyme's website and I couldn't find it.
So is that 6 plus 2 or 6 including the 2?
6 including the 2, the way I understand it.
Yeah, okay. Because parking too, like 5 acres just seems small to me. But when you get to 7 or 8, I think it's like if it's somewhere between, you know, no less than 7 or 7.5, I don't know.
Well, if you're not growing anything on site, I mean, you've got 5
yeah.
acres for building and parking.
But for wine, do they have to grow like a certain percentage of the grapes, or they just have to be from Connecticut?
I believe it's for a vineyard, you have to have a certain percentage, but for a winery, you could set up a winery. You could set up a winery in a commercial building somewhere.
Okay. So they're not doing a vineyard, they're not growing it, they're just selling. Is that?
I'm trying to understand the purpose of this draft. Is it to build a structure in the middle of a neighborhood that essentially sells beer, wine, and cider, which could essentially be done in an industrial park of some sort that a person made? Or are we actually trying to grow the hops, grow the vines, and then produce because that's how I understood the draft to be written, knowing that there's a lot of loopholes, but I think that we're kind of veering off course here. And now we're just talking about in the middle of my neighborhood, somebody could set up shop and then open up and start selling beer, which kind of it takes away from this draft. So I think it's important to understand that under a farm, brewery, cidery, winery, and distillery, there has to be something grown on site in order to make that farm concept a reality.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just an industrial park, which we can put in I don't know, in one of the industrial parks that we have instead of a neighborhood that doesn't need that farmland.
No, I agree that I do believe the language is for actually growing the grapes either on your farm or somewhere else in Durham and getting them, processed on your property if possible. But yes, grown in Durham, 25%, right now the regulations, as I understand them, 25% of the grapes need to be grown in Connecticut. Now, whether there's going to be a certain percentage that need to be grown in Durham, that was one of my points I was going to make. Are they going to put a percentage on how much of the grapes have to be grown or how much of the acreage has to be used? Because I think that might be two different things if we're talking about two different sizes of farms.
So I'm new to this game.
Yeah.
But do you mind if I chime in? Because I did read that material that you emailed me. And based on what I read, my understanding is that if I want to start a winery and I want to grow the grapes, I need at least 10 acres. So the intention is that you're going to grow the materials that you need to create whatever it is that you're creating, whether it's a brewery, and based on the River Cog's paperwork here, they state percentages of the crops that need to be grown on the property. So then looking at the draft, the draft has the definitions of what each one is: a farm, brewery, cidery, winery, distillery. And it talks about the minimum acreage. I would imagine that by identifying the minimum acreage, you're basically saying you have to grow some of the product on that property. So I believe we're speaking about someone who wants to have a vineyard and be able to take the grapes and produce wine right on the property and have wine tastings or whatever it is they do. That's my impression on it.
That's what my take is as well.
I guess my question is, don't you think does the Cog River guidelines go hand in hand with our guidelines, or do we need to specify that a little bit further in our guidelines too?
These are not guidelines. They're recommendations that were solicited by our Planning and Zoning Commission, one being from the Regional Agricultural Council and then the Regional Planning Committee. Every time, and this is my experience, and Joe can correct me if I'm wrong, when it comes to rewriting the regulations, it seems that it's a go-to to go see what the other parts of the state are doing. And we're part of RiverCog, so we try to keep things
Consistent.
the same, I guess you could say. So these were recommendations, these two documents. And there are certain state regulations that have to be followed as well. So some of that stuff that's already written, I don't see why it needs to be rewritten by us.
Well, it needs to be in our guidelines. They're specific to Durham.
Right, I agree with you. I don't want to give my point of view yet because I want you guys all to finish what you're saying. So
if I could,
Yep.
This is Joe.
yes, Joe.
That what ends up happening is that any town in the COG the 17 towns that are in the COG, when a town goes to write a regulation or modify a regulation, if the change could possibly impact an adjoining community, and it's typically 500 feet of another community, that we send the changes in for review, comments to the COG Planning Committee. And then they provide the feedback, which they've done. I guess a few other the comments that I'd make is that I believe it might have been Maggie that had mentioned the highways and collector roads. just for a point of context with that, Portland, I believe it was, well, it's probably close to a month ago, just held a public hearing with their planning and zoning commission to change the regulations in Portland to only allow these on highways, on state highways. So just so you're aware of that. There are state regulations that require a certain percentage of product be grown for some of the categories. That was discussed by the commission, but the choice was left to a portion of so that you should, I think, feel free to comment about that if you feel that there should be some set percentage. Some towns have a set percentage that they have to produce 20 or 25% of the product that they're going to sell has to be grown on their property. And I'll just throw out there that there was discussion about following the state requirements for it. But one of the things that I had cautioned about was that the state could constantly be changing in their regulation. There's a significant amount of lobbying activity that's going on now by folks that want to do these type of facilities that they go to zero and you don't have to grow anything on your property. So I think Maggie hit a good point that the way this draft regulation is written, these type of things could pop up in anybody's neighborhood. So that as a community, we should be, in my opinion, and I've expressed this at the planning and zoning, that we should be extremely cautious about how we're writing these regulations, that we should be specific enough that we know what the outcome is going to be. And if you talk to anybody that owns a vineyard, an actual vineyard that's growing their own grapes, and I told the commission I had spent almost 3 hours with one of the owners of one of the largest vineyards in Connecticut. And he told me that if 6 out of all the vineyards in Connecticut were probably growing enough grapes to meet that 25% requirement, and that all the rest of the vineyards that have been popping up in Connecticut are growing nowhere near the 20 to 25% that they're required to do. And if you think about it, and you look at the example that was given about wine in the COGS review and recommendations, that if you, and I would assume most of us have been to vineyards before, that if you think about a 6-acre parcel and you take 2 acres out of that, it's leaving you 4 acres. How many grapes can you grow on 4 acres and still have a building for a tasting room, a parking lot, probably a building where you're manufacturing the wine? You're eating up a significant portion of the property. And do you realistically think that on a 6-acre lot and utilizing 4 acres, that you're going to grow 25% of the grapes that you're going to use and bottle into wine and sell throughout the year? The math doesn't work.
So I agree with you coming from a family that has obviously a huge agricultural farm of 1,100 acres. I think the 10 is too small. I think it's parking concerns. I think too many lots in this town have the 10-acre availability. the end of cul-de-sacs, and things like that. I think it needs to be increased to allow for more flexibility with agriculture on site, as well as potential building dwellings for bathrooms, parking, driveways, things like that. And I think we need to be able to control this a little bit more in the rules and regulations versus just opening ourselves up to what I see as a potential nightmare in our neighborhoods. And I'm sorry for being that person on this team to not support the way that it's currently written. But I'm sorry, I don't.
No need to apologize, Maggie. That we've been
No,
asked
you
for
have an
our
opinion. Everybody has an opinion.
Absolutely. And I don't think we're not the ones writing it. We can look at it as economic development. We can look at it as residents of Durham. And if you feel strongly as, you wear your hat as a resident more often than you are a member of EDC, and that's how you feel, that's what you should say.
So where did the 10 acres come from if it's not doable? If I mean, I know that it's one
Well-
opinion or two, but if it's not doable, why is 10 acres on our plate if it's not going to work?
Well, because there's some folks that believe that we shouldn't be deciding what a business model is. And then there's there was some investors that came, I guess, to the town, talked to either Laura or to Robin, and they were looking to see, because our regulations today do not allow this, that if there was any possibility, and what they pointed to was the vineyard that recently opened, I think within the last year or two, in Northford. So Robin went and looked at the Northford regulation and took some of the, I guess, what she felt were the good points in the regulation and started to started this draft process for us to review.
Okay, that makes sense. Would it be possible to ask the person interested to do a site plan for us to say, okay, here's your 10 acres. Let's see what that looks like on a site plan. Everything from the toilets to an outdoor sitting area, if there's going to be a fire pit, and look at that. Has that been done?
No, because typically, except for the two gentlemen that came to our last meeting that wanted to discuss what they were looking at, and they voiced their opinions about what type of business model they were looking at. One was going to be the grower, the other was going to be the manufacturer and end product seller. But
Yeah, that's right.
typically that it seems like a lot of people, where that would certainly help us, to your point, typically they don't do that, which it's unfortunate.
Well, is there somebody in one of our committees that could do that so that we're not going blindsided? We can kind of get a handle on, because a lot of people seemed pretty strong about the 5 acres, never mind the 10. But now that we're talking about it, I kind of would like to see this on paper.
Well, I guess the thing I would say is to encourage you all, either if you end at the end of your meeting, you collectively have something that you would like to present to the commission, or certainly individually, I would hope that you would all join our public hearing next Wednesday night and express your opinions and concerns and what you think may be good, what you think might be bad, where we need to improve. Because it's just my personal opinion that that we as a planning and zoning commission, but I'm speaking for myself as a resident, that I think we're rushing too fast into this. It seems to be a pattern for us that we rush
Yep.
to get something out there. And in fear, my personal fear is that we have not done a detailed, good enough job to understand the impacts and to make sure that what we're doing, that we're going to achieve the outcome as a community. We're going to achieve the outcome that we want to achieve. And I think it was Maggie's points are exactly the points that I've been discussing at our planning and zoning meetings.
Hey, Joe, I have a quick question. Is there, I feel like we are putting the cart before the horse as it relates to this farm land with the land and all of that. Is there, if somebody wanted to start up a hobby business with a brewery or a cidery or whatever, similar to what Wallingford has and so forth, does P&Z have a restriction as to what can be put inside of any vacant industrial spaces right now? Or would that, it make sense to start there and then progress to this?
No, I guess, well, you got me.
That's essentially a tasting room where they don't have to have, they can make it, they can serve it, it has parking, it's in well-lit areas, it's on main roads, things like that. It essentially serves the purpose where we're bringing an economic revenue source into town, but we don't have it in our direct neighborhoods per se right now until we can iron this side out.
Yeah, and I think the way that it goes is that you have to look at our use tables for each of the zones. So we have the industrial, we have commercial, and we have farm residential. And in our industrial area, manufacturing obviously is allowed. So I believe the opinion of the commission was that if somebody wanted to do a brewery in our industrial area, you're manufacturing beer, you're manufacturing wine, and we had already had a company that was in the on the Ozick side of the street, up in the back, in one of the industrial units up there, that was actually running a distillery business. And they had done pretty well, and they needed more space, so they ended up moving to Wallingford. And so that type of activity is allowed. And under our current regulations, you can use 25% of the building that you're in for retail sales in the industrial area. So to your point, yes, somebody could start doing that today in our industrial area, by my interpretation of the regulations.
Great.
Maggie,
Yes.
it's Carol. I agree with you. It seems that we are putting the cart before the horse here. We have to go by the rules and regs and what P&Z comes up with for the best interest of our towns. They're the ones that are going to be setting all the regulations. I agree that we can give them some ideas, but until there's actual regulations from P&Z on this type of farming or retail for breweries, microbreweries, wineries, our hands are a little bit tied. We could express what we would like, but as far as the final decision, it's up to P&Z. And we have a great person that just came on board, Robin, and she seems to have a lot of knowledge in these areas, and she's willing to go out and get the information from the other towns so that these problems don't up like they have in the past. So I'm a little bit confused here why we're going this route with all these questions when the draft has been put out there and P&Z hasn't ruled on anything yet. So this to me sounds like we're jumping the gun.
Joe, am I right in that you had mentioned it's still a work in progress and you're still editing? Is that correct? And that's why they're asking for input?
That's why we want input.
Okay.
I think it's critically important from my perspective as a member of that commission that we get as much feedback and information from the residents of this town, from your commission. Thursday night, the Agricultural Commission is going to be holding our meeting, special meeting. We're going to be going over this regulation. I'm also a member of the Agricultural Commission. And we're going to be going over it, and we're going to be providing them feedback also. So that whatever your opinions are, and today this currently is the draft regulation, and what you see is potentially what could become our regulations. So I don't think you're jumping the gun in the discussions that you're having and the feedback you're going to provide us.
Joe, if I understand this correctly, we have two gentlemen that want to come together as a business, one a grower and one a manufacturing it and selling it. So would we direct the grower to a farm property and the manufacturer sell it retail to a industrial property and just end it there?
Well, I think that the grower can grow.
Grow.
The grower can grow anywhere in Durham. Our current regulations and, allow farming. So all he's doing is farming. So he doesn't need to do anything. He can farm as much acreage of grapes or any other product he'd like to do or she would like to do. And it's well within what's allowed in our regulations. It becomes the manufacturing and the retail sales is where the issues may or may not be with the regulations. If they wanted to do it, and I think we're going to be having discussions about it, if you're going to be doing it in a commercial zoned area, is that manufacturing in our commercial zoned area, and do we allow that today? And whereas in the industrial, we allow manufacturing and we allow a percentage of retail. So if they so chose today, the grower could grow and the industrial guy or the seller, the manufacturer, he could or she could do that in our industrial area today. I think just the question in my mind is whether it's allowable today in our commercial areas based off the use table that we currently have.
Right, because to Maggie's point, I'm trying to picture like driving on these windy roads that some don't have lights and people hanging out and drinking and being in neighborhoods and people are walking with dogs. Do we really want that, or should we keep that over in the industrial where it's more on the mainstream and they're in and out of our town on the borders, not in our
Have
neighborhood?
you ever gone to Gavea's? Where's Gavea's? It's out in the middle of nowhere. Am I right? Is there an issue up there getting to Gavea's? I've been there many times. I don't know if there's proper lighting or not, but that's the kind of atmosphere that people are looking for. And I don't know if I want to
have a lot more than 5 acres.
Correct. And if that's it,
That is correct. But maybe you can grow hops on 5 acres. Maybe there's other products that you can be growing that you don't need 150 acres or whatever. I happen to know that Joe Gavea's opinion was 12 acres is not enough to grow enough grapes. But I think that if we restrict the acreage we're going to restrict what people can do with their property and to try to make a living, I think it should be taken. I'm throwing out my opinion, and I didn't mean to do that right now because I'm sitting back and waiting for everybody else to finish. But I think each farm should be taken on an individual basis. Can they, as you said, put a building on there? Can they have enough room for parking? All these things need to be taken into consideration. If they've got 5 acres and they can accommodate that, then we shouldn't chop them down at the knees.
Correct, but Janet, the experience at Gouveia, which has ample parking, ample space, is a completely different experience than Paradise Hills, which is right down the road, but it's at the end of a cul-de-sac. It
Right.
has limited parking. I mean, we're comparing apples and oranges at this point, I think. And the only reason Paradise Hills kind of squeezed by was because they weren't kind of buttoned up on their rules and regulations, in my opinion. So do we want to have a Paradise Hills in our cul-de-sacs and have that road traffic and not access to major highways and things like that? I guess it's two very different scenarios between Gouveia and what this set of rules could yield for the town of Durham.
We've kind of made my point that maybe it should be taken on an individual basis, but if you had 5 acres, out there on the windy hills out of a residential area and you can accommodate it, it should be considered. That's my opinion. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
The thing that I will say, that the common denominator between the two of those businesses is that both of them have had complaints by neighbors and people that live in the area, believe it or not.
Well,
Yep.
then, that's the not in my backyard people. I mean, you don't see droves of people driving to either one of those places like you would people going to the Durham Fair. Yet we put up with that every year for how many days? It is what it is. We live, we get through it. I mean, it's usually people coming and going at a leisurely pace. You're never going to see 50 cars at one time pulling into either one of those vineyards. That's just the way it seems to be. Anyway, let's keep going. Let's keep getting people's opinions. Antonio, I know you're sitting there taking this all in. If you'd like to jump in, please do.
Oh, absolutely. I have a couple of quick questions for Joe first. He might be able to answer them for me.
Yep.
What's the timeline on actually establishing these regulations that were drafted? Is there a timeline for that?
Hopefully, no.
Okay, so.
And I say no, Antonio, because it's my opinion that we shouldn't be putting ourselves under any deadline. The deadline should be that all the commissioners, before we hold a vote on a final document, that we all feel comfortable that we've done the best we can to create the regulation. And and there was discussion at our last public hearing, should we vote that night? And there was still a lot of items and questions that were not answered. And we decided to extend the public hearing until next week. So next week, when we hold our next public hearing, if there's information and feedback provided to us that we think we still need to go back and work on this, we'll most likely extend the public hearing again, or sometimes we'll utilize the option of closing the public hearing and then just continue to work on the draft.
Okay.
And then at a later date, open the public hearing again.
Okay. Now, my other question. So in my professional experience, the state establishes statutes and regulations, and they give the towns or the local jurisdictions, the authority to develop regulations and ordinances that follow the state rules or the state statutes, and they can implement them as long as they exceed what the state requirements are. Is that the case here? So if the state says you got to have 10 acres, does Durham have the authority to say, no, we want to make it 12? That's my question.
And I believe the answer is yes, because the state statute today says 5 acres. And there's many towns that are above the 5 and 10 and above.
Okay, now that makes sense to me why the COG mentions 10 acres in their paperwork, because what they're doing is they're actually exceeding the state minimum requirement. So the draft document that was put together by P&Z, based on what I've heard here from everyone, needs some tweaking. And by you explaining that there is no formal timeline, that's good, because you can get the input and it can be tweaked. And if it's going to be made more stringent for the benefit of the town, or if it's going to be less stringent for the economic benefit of the town, you know, that's what needs to be looked at. Because, you know, this committee is economic development, so we obviously want to bring some potential economic business to town, but at the same time, you know, I kind of agree with Maggie. I'm not a farmer. I wasn't born in Durham, but I like the way this town is, and it's rooted in agriculture and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of things to weigh here, but when you also have to look at, all right, these individuals that came that were mentioned at this meeting, one wants to grow and one wants to manufacture. What's their point? They want to do it on the same property, or they want to do it on separate property? They want to do they want to farm, or they want to grow grapes, and one guy wants to make the wine in another building, or do they want to do that in one particular area itself? And so where it becomes a little bit, we have to be careful is because of the potential of having people coming in and willing to make an investment like that, that we don't rush through establishing regulations that are going to affect our town in a negative way going forward. So, you know, my take is not having a timeline is good, to be able to fine tune the draft and bring up the points that Cheryl brought up into the draft, in the discussion for to the draft, and bring up the points that Maggie brought up. And I think you're going to find that it's going to take the P&Z committee a little bit longer to finally establish some specific regulations. And like I said before, I read the information that I was given, and my take is that there could be potential individuals that want to buy farmland to grow grapes, to grow hops or whatever, and produce the end product on the same property. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Hope I'm not too lost.
No, thank you for reading the stuff that I sent you. I'm so proud. All right, anybody else have anything to say?
Well, I'll just say to Antonio that the two gentlemen that did present and spoke at the public hearing, their business model was 2 separate entities, not on the same property. But I think that may be a less of a common business model than the typical vineyard or brewery type operation, that it's going to be one owner, they produce and they manufacture. Very similar to
Thank you.
Generally what we see everywhere.
Yep. Thank you, Joe.
Joe, I just have a thought of thinking, okay, I live on a cul-de-sac. I've been there for years, and there's this huge farmland kind of abutting a few houses property. What kind of feedback or input from the neighbors do you think that these, a prospective business person would get? And, it could be very uncomfortable. I don't think I would want this in my neighborhood, is what I'm saying. Because it's not like the Durham Fair. The Durham Fair, I live in the Durham Fair, and everyone knows that, and I absolutely love it. But it's a couple weeks. This is not a couple weeks. This is going to be there tomorrow. So I'm just wondering if neighbors are going to fight the people coming in, and it's just going to be an ugly situation in somebody's backyard of their home to have a brewery or a winery and music, and could be a wedding, food trucks lining up, cars. I just don't see it. Sorry.
Well,
I see like a farmer growing it, and I see it more in industrial where they're selling it. You know, a lot of these places too pop up in old buildings, old industrial buildings, warehouses, or, you know, some of those things. But I don't know. I got to think about this too.
Well, I think, Cheryl, that you kind of hit the nail on the head. And from my perspective with this regulation, and I know that, you know, in some factions that I'm the person that says no, but I've grown up in this town. I want to see economic development. I've lived around farms all my life in town. I have animals, and my goal is I want to see good development for our community. And I think a good vineyard, a good brewery, I think there'll be assets to our town. But I don't think as a community we don't do a good job in the planning and the regulations to end up getting what we want to see. And I think that saying that you hit the nail on the head is that when you start to have too small a parcel of land where this type of activity will be allowed, we are certainly going to have problems. We're going to have, and I think that one of our failings that comes from not doing a good job planning is just what you said, is that when a business comes and wants to do something, and whether these folks have entered into an agreement or they've actually gone and purchased the property, and then when the neighbors find out this is going to happen, they're going to be in an uproar. And one of the potential outcomes is that the Planning and Zoning Commission approves something, and the neighbors decide they're going to take it to court and appeal our decision. So now we've got a bad reputation from the business side. We've got angry neighbors, and all the taxpayers of Durham are going to be flipping the legal bill for all of this. And currently, Laura just mentioned it last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting, that between the Planning and Zoning Commission and Inland Wetlands Commission, our legal budget is $27,000 over budget. And we're not even at the end of the fiscal year yet. I imagine it'll grow probably by another 10,000 before the end of the fiscal year, if not a little bit more. A couple of them are the planning and zoning side, where the commission made a decision, the neighbors didn't like it, and took it to court, and we're in appeal process. One of them is from the dog kennel on Route 68 that opened up. We've probably spent $10,000 in legal fees. At a minimum, it's $10,000 already, I believe, over the kennel that opened up on Route 68. So I think it just behooves us to be extremely cautious, diligent in the planning and the crafting of the regulation. And again, I'll go back to understanding what our community would like to see. And when this was first brought up, and unfortunately that we've been put in, you know, the circumstances that we're living under today with this pandemic, that it's kind of my opinion that if this draft or a slight variation of this goes through, we're doing it in the middle of a pandemic. The people in our community are more worried about how they're going to take care of their families, feed their families, and we're drafting a regulation that will impact every area of our town. And I think when somebody goes to open one of these places on a 10 or a 5 acre lot, people are not going to be happy campers when they find out that this is potentially what's going to end up in their backyard. My opinion.
I agree, Joe.
Linda, did you want to speak?
No, I'm good.
Anybody else? No? Okay, I guess it's my turn. I don't know if I want to go now, but this is what I was going to send to Robin, and I agree with you that it's not something that we should rush into. I'm always thinking about what happened over there with the kennels on 68, whether the people who are running it misrepresented themselves to planning and zoning or what. I don't know the circumstances. I personally like the 5 acres, not less than 5 acres, if it's doable. I think it should be taken on a farm by farm basis of what can be accommodated on the property. I think that 10 acres is restrictive. I think it's relative to the size of the operation, whether you're going to have like a large tasting room like a Gavea's or a little heated tent like the one in Portland. I know they have another building, but they have a little tent out in the back that's heated that is, you can go out there and drink your wine. We have to take into consideration what the plan is for these people. And if they don't cross all the T's and dot all the I's that they're supposed to do, then they should not open up their operation. I like the language that is in the suggestions from the River Cog Agricultural Commission and the Planning Committee. I feel, and I could be wrong, that they have more experience with this type of stuff, but I think that their recommendations are good. And I think that we definitely need to have certain things that should be restrictive to prevent issues like you're talking about with the kennel, like specific language for noise and lighting, and whether there's going to be food and facilities, public facilities and music and that kind of stuff. That should be in there. The hours of operation should be, in my opinion, something like 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or something like that. And, if it's a weekend, maybe they can extend it a little bit longer. That's my feeling on it. I don't want this to get rushed through. I also don't want it to take a year and a half like the agricultural events one did. And that took a long time for one regulation. And I think with all of our input, not just this commission, but the rest of the people in this town, that they're going to see that they probably need to go back to the drawing board on this. And that's my opinion. So
can I just add that, would it be possible to do a site map, if you will, of the town and available properties if we did the 5 acres and kind of X them off and say, okay, this is a cluster neighborhood, or this is a 5 acre and there's really no neighbors around at all, or what it would look like if we said 10 to 15 acres or whatever, kind of just to see what the possibilities were. Like, I'm coming into this town, I want 5 acres, I want to do a winery. Where are all the 5 acres?
it might be better to see if there's any wineries out there that are already established on less than 10 acres and see how they're handling it. The one in Northford, not the one that Joe was referring to that was new, but the other Rose, whatever it is there on 17. It seems like a small operation. There's a, the tasting building is not that big. I've never actually been there in the daylight, so I don't know where they grow their grapes or what their situation is. But I think it's probably better to see one that's already in production.
Well, yeah, and I'm more leaning towards seeing where are our 5 acre plots of land that somebody could potentially put an application in.
Joe, how many acres you got, Joe? We're gonna go walk on your land.
No, like a 5 acre or whatever, just like what neighborhoods are they in? Because I think that if we approved a 5 acre anywhere, we should really know where these plots of land are, because if we have 25 acre plots of land, let's just say, and all of them are in clusters of neighborhoods, we can't approve that, bottom line. But if all of them are in fields and no one's around them, well, maybe that's a different story. But shouldn't we have some sort of site map of our town where these possibilities of this land is?
Carol, I guess from what I know about the town, with the 2 acre minimum that we have in town, the majority of parcels kind of scale beyond that. For example, on Tuttle Road with Brewster and things like that, we have a 6-acre parcel that could potentially fall within this, which is kind of just kitty corner to Brewster, where we have young children. And then we have a 10-acre lot down the road that's set far behind that you would never know existed there, but it would fall within these requirements. And so that's where I'm struggling and have to argue that I think even 10 is just too limited, because the majority of lots in this town are within that 5 to 10 acre. And I think the best option that we have is to control what this could look like, is if we kind of increase the acreage to limit the amount of available properties within neighborhoods.
I'm going to give you an example. I was just looking at Leaning Oaks farm off on Maiden Lane. So if we had the 10-acre restriction, and they have 9.86 acres, because I'm looking at their card on the assessor's list, because he's lacking that. Somebody do the math for me. 2/10 of an acre, whatever the heck it is. I don't do math in my head. What if he's lacking that little bit, and if he were able to accommodate this, because his property is way off the road. I don't know who's around him, but so we would deny him based on what you all are saying. Is that right?
Well, I think that there could be something said in there, I don't know, Joe could speak to this, that it's 10 acres and then upon approval going left a few or right a few, not few acres, but like this situation. I don't know, that might be opening up a Pandora's box, because then you're not cut and dry.
Well, in that type of situation, I guess the owner has an option to go for a variance before the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I would imagine, you're talking a couple tenths of an acre. And that somebody potentially, you could go before the Zoning Board of Appeals and get a variance for those 2/10 of an acre.
So it's not exactly written in stone. And to Cheryl's
there
point,
isn't.
I mean, Cheryl, you're a very visual person. I understand that. So am I. I don't know how you would be able to go around and pick out a 5-acre plot and try to visualize what you're trying to do. Again, my opinion is it should be taken on a individual basis. If I have 5 acres out in the middle of nowhere and I'm not going to bother anybody, then why should I be denied the opportunity to try to do something like this? Again, individual, there may not be that many places that can accommodate this in our town. It comes down to the same argument that I use when talking about, and we're getting off track, and I am sorry, but I got to say it because it'll be bothering me if I don't, that certain properties on Main Street could be considered for mixed use. Not all would qualify for that. There's probably a few that could. And I don't think that the people who are trying to live in their homes or trying to make a living on their farms should have to be stuck in this collective that they have to do everything everybody else does. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, anybody else? There's a couple of things I want to get to. Cheryl, you were in a hurry. I know you have something to do, so.
Not anymore. I'm good. Thanks. No
You're all
problem.
fired up now. I see that.
No problem.
Anybody got anything else to say? Who's trying to talk? Joe, was that you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
To Cheryl's point about the acreage and the number of lots, I have a worksheet. It's in the house
Of course you do, Joe.
with the number of lots by acreage. So I could try to send that out to you guys tomorrow.
That'd be great. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, because I think
All of our zoning, if it's not industrial, it's not commercial, is there just residential or is it all farm residential?
it's all farm residential.
Okay, so I could do it. No, I don't have enough property. Never mind.
But that's one
Have
of
an
the
acre.
considerations, I think to Cheryl's point, is that from my perspective, and I think the number is somewhere, and had done the research, that somewhere between 70 and 90 10-acre and above parcels. And that was only from, I think, 10 to 20 acres, not counting anything over 20 acres. So if you drop from 10 to 5, that number, and I'm just giving you a rough guess, I would guess that number is probably going to triple how many available lots that could potentially do this. And that's where I think to Cheryl's point is that maybe understanding the impact, how many potential lots do you have? Now, once you've passed a regulation and people see that, wow, I could do this on 5 acres in that town. I don't think we want to be known as the town that has
No.
an overload of vineyard wineries and breweries.
That's very optimistic of you to even think that that would happen, because I just don't think it would, but you never know.
I'll give you the
Right.
example, and you could talk to Robin and you could talk to Laura, that unless we're being told and provided bad information, that there's already been people in our that are interested in our industrial area in a brewery. We've had the 2 folks that spoke last Wednesday night. And then there was another group of investors from that referenced the Northford property, which was that Rose Winery that you mentioned, Janet. That's the one that's the one on 17. That's what I was referring to.
Oh, okay. I thought there was a newer one, because that one's been there a while. Okay.
And so there is a lot of people out there looking to do something in this realm.
Let me ask you a question. Now, when you were saying about, I was given Jesse's farm there, Laney Oaks, as an example of just short of 10 acres, and that he could go for a variance. Is that what you said? Is that the term you used?
Yes.
Okay. So say I have 5 acres and I qualify for all the stuff that planning and zoning and Robin are putting into the language, but it is recommended that I go to my neighbors and ask for their input. Like if I were to put up a garage on my property, close to my property line or within 10 feet or whatever it's supposed to be, next to somebody, I would probably have to get a variance to make sure that it's not going to bother my neighbors. Is that an option when we're a little bit nervous about a situation, to go to the neighbors and ask them for that before they even plop down their grapes and start making grapes? Like, I don't know what went wrong with Wallingford with the, excuse me, the one in the residential neighborhood there, but I've been there many times.
And I can tell you
I
from
don't see that much traffic in there, and I don't hear the noise. I don't know what they're complaining about, honestly.
Yeah, and I can tell you from my own personal experience, I had I applied for a variance on a piece of property, and I did go to my neighbors and I explained to them why I was seeking the variance. They didn't have a problem with it, and they supported my getting the variance.
Right.
So yeah, you could potentially do that, and hopefully that what you're trying to accomplish, everybody around you is happy with.
Right.
But there may be
You
the
would
one
have to question somebody who's going to buy just 5 acres to put a vineyard on and say, these are the things you're going to have to do before they make the purchase, because we don't want anybody purchasing land and then being disappointed that they can't use it for what they wanted. So there's a couple different sides to this equation. All righty. Like I said, this was just to get our opinions out there. I want you all to write down exactly how you feel. Like I said, we're not a collective. We're not the Borg. I'm not telling you what to do. So if that you feel strongly that the regulations need to be tweaked, which I do too. I think there should be more in this. It should be it should be clean. There should be no doubts. We don't want to have an issue like, and I hate to keep bringing it up, but the kennel on 68. At first, I thought people were exaggerating with what the issues were up there until I spoke to some of my friends who live there and that I trust their opinion. And I went, okay, I guess that really is a bad situation up there. So that's what I want you all to do.
Hey, Janet.
Yes.
Question. Who are we supposed to email our feedback to?
You can send it to Jen Keogh, and she will forward it to Robin. So it's J Keogh, was it KEOGH at townofdurhamct.org. If you don't, I'll send you the email if you need me to. But
Yeah, I can. If it was in your email, I can look there. And what is her title? Like, what's her role? What's her title?
she's the administrative assistant in the building department.
Okay.
She's kind of
Thank you.
the secretary for everybody who's in there. Yeah.
You.
Janet,
Yes, Joe.
could I make one more request of your group, I guess?
Sure.
That didn't come up in your review of the regulations that I think plays a significant role maybe. That if you
Okay.
guys could consider your opinions about providing setbacks. And setbacks are where, if you're in a residential area, you can't build, the house has to be 50 feet off, back off the road. It's got to be
Right.
within 40 feet of your side property lines. So there was discussion in the commission about establishing setbacks. And in our residential, where our residential zones abut commercial and industrial, on the property, there's for the commercial side, say you have to stay 50 feet back with any activity from a residential property line. And if you guys have any thoughts or opinions about applying setbacks in this regulation. Currently, there was some in the beginning and then they were taken out. And just if you guys would consider that and offer your opinion.
That's a very good point. Thank you.
Joe, so if you buy a property, are you going to be grandfathered in?
To this regulation?
For the setback?
No, they did, the thinking of the commission today is that if you bought, right now it's currently 10, so if say, for example, you bought a 10-acre lot and you had a proposal, you would come in with your proposal and the commission at the time of your application would decide what setbacks might be appropriate based on the layout, I think, of the property, where you plan to grow, where you're going to put your parking area, where you're going to put your tasting room, where you're going to put your patio. So the commission would decide at the time what would be appropriate.
Okay, my question is, I probably wasn't clear enough with it. What if there's an existing, let's say, barn on the property? And it's only within the 10-foot setback that you've purchased? Is that going to be grandfathered in to use that building with the 10-foot setback, or is it going to have to be demolished and a new one built?
I would say there will be nothing grandfathered. It's my opinion, but I think it's a good question to ask. But it would be my opinion, there is nothing that is grandfathered.
That's not good. Because
But
if the buildings are already established on the property that somebody is purchasing,
yeah,
that's already been approved through the regulations or, over time or when it was built. So to turn around then and tell somebody that you can't use this building.
well, I guess, Carol, if I could stop you, it would be, what would the use be of the building.
Well, let's say it's a barn.
But it's a barn, if you're gonna use it as a barn and not have
Well-
commercial retail activity in it, then it would still be a barn.
But you
But-
can, but you can purchase any property right now on any piece of land, and when the buyer buys the property, they can still use that, but they have to maybe renovate it for whatever they want to use it for, whether it's an in-law apartment or, you know, a garage, and not use it as a barn, make it a workshop. That can be done, but to tell somebody that's going to come in and maybe want to use it as a tasting room or just to go, you know, or something like that, or just to have a party in there, luncheons, a mini restaurant, something, a food, you know, an eatery place, that you aren't allowed to use that building and you're going to have to change the setback. I think P&Z really needs to look at that, because that is really not fair to the person who's buying that piece of property.
Well, and I'm just using it as an example that it's just my opinion that just because there's a building that's on that property doesn't necessarily mean that it will meet the requirements that the commission establishes.
Well,
And if it's 10 feet away from a property line and there's going to be a lot of activity and there's going to be a house that's 40 feet to the side of it, the commission may deem that it's not acceptable. But I think it's a very valid question to be asking during the public hearing.
because that could really open up a Pandora's box just on normal residential farm properties in the future of purchasing properties with outbuildings.
Yeah, yep, I'm in agreement with you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that it for everybody on this topic? So,
I just have one question for Joe. So if somebody purchased a house that was deemed commercial and it was 25 feet away from the road, and it's always been residential but deemed commercial because of a change, and they wanted to put I don't know, a real estate office in there, they couldn't, if it was only 25 feet from the road, it would have to be 50? Is that what this would mean?
Give me a second to think. It's your example, it's a commercially zoned property?
Let's say it's a residential house that is in the guidelines of turning commercial if somebody wanted it to.
Then your example is it's a commercially zoned property, but it's currently being used as residential.
Right. And if they wanted to turn it into commercial, they couldn't because it was only 25 feet off the road?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay. I
I'm
didn't
not
think
saying-
so. I just wanted to clarify. Thanks.
Nope, I'm not saying that at all.
okay, now are we done with this little project? I guess we did have a lot to talk about. Okay, I wanted to move on to Laura's suggestion about helping out some of these businesses that have been closed, especially the gift shops and such, because Mother's Day is not this coming Sunday, but the following Sunday. I'm not really sure what she has in mind for what we can do. The only thing I think we can do is encourage people to maybe buy gift cards from these places. She also wants us to think outside the box as far as promoting like having your oil changed over at Durham Auto and that kind of stuff, but something, because a lot of these, especially our gift shops and retailers, Mother's Day is a big thing to them, and this year it's not going to be the same. So
Hey, Janet,
what?
I saw online the other day, this is just an idea we could throw out for these gift shops and whatnot.
Mhm.
The Rustic Barn did a virtual tour where you could literally, it was like a Google map almost, where you can like move through the store and look and shop. And it was It was awesome. It was on Facebook if you want to take a peek.
Who did it?
The Rustic Barn in Killingworth.
Oh, okay. I like that idea because that's really about the only choice that they have. And I know that what Lindsay at the relaxation room has been posting little gift baskets and things like that you can, call her, pay for it and pick it up. I know that Wild Wisteria is putting out there that they can customize stuff for you if you want. I think that what you just said is actually perfect. That's the only way we could probably do that right now is make that suggestion to them.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is maybe some volunteers to reach out, excuse me, to some of these gift shops and make that suggestion to them, and we will help them any way we can. We can put the video on our Facebook page. I really don't know how much more we can do beyond that.
We could do on the Facebook page is just send them a private message and share the link of what Rustic Barn did and see if they want to go down that route and they can do it.
That, or we can treat it, I think that's a great idea if the business is able to do it. And we could also treat it like we do a Small Business Saturday. And if they have promotions, we can just keep sharing and encourage shoppers to just shop small and live locally.
Well, I'd like somebody to maybe spearhead this for us. I have been spending a lot of time just kind of keeping track of the whole Eat Local, Win Local thing, which is going pretty well. And I got something to ask you about that coming up as well. So if somebody would like to spearhead this and contact, the ones I can think of, obviously off the top of my head, is Valentina has beautiful things. She actually has an Etsy store, which I've been trying to put out there that she's been selling stuff. Wild Wisteria, relaxation room / Main Street Boutique. We have Jennifer over at Borrowed Time Emporium, who also has a website that she sells her stuff on. And those are the types of places that I think we can try to help because they're not getting foot traffic. And I don't even see why they can't take appointments, one person at a time to go in and shop or something like that. I don't know why that's a no-no, but if someone would like to take that on, I would appreciate it. Any takers?
And I'm happy to help in where to take that over. I have some time, so.
Okay, so if you want to reach out to those and anybody you can think of, really.
Should we send an email out to all of the email addresses we have for all the businesses?
We could.
Just to not leave anybody out. I don't know.
Right.
Just a thought.
I think that's a great idea. And then we can follow up with the, I guess, brick and mortar shops that we know of.
Yeah, the personal touch is nice too. But I don't know if Maggie and Lindsay, you guys want to work on that together. That's fine with me. One can do the web, the emailing and Facebooking, and the other could maybe reach out and over the phone or however you want to do it. That would
maybe, DC Farms has, I don't know if anybody would be offering any promotions right now, but maybe if they mention, EDC 2020, you would save 10% on your Mother's Day order or Mother's Day plan or whatever.
That sounds like a good idea too. And I would also, put out there that they can sell gift cards too. They don't have to necessarily shop now. Buy your gift card and you have something to look forward to when the world doesn't end, when things get back to normal. I think that would be a great thing. And also, if you have had a chance to go to that, the Excel sheet that Laura sent to us, and on people have been doing that, seeing how they're doing. I went into Carmine's today and I said, how are you doing? They said they're busier than ever. And they're afraid that when this is all over, that they're not going to be busy anymore. I don't think they're going to have that problem, but that was actually good to hear that they're doing very well. Okay. The other thing I wanted to put out to you is I was getting a little nervous about our Eat Local, Win Local, and that there wasn't a lot of participation until like right at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. We did get 6 entries. A couple came in after 6 o'clock. I had already basically did the drawing, if you will. But a lot of times we try to promote stuff and it doesn't always work out the way we wanted to. So I reached out to a Be Social marketing, Drew in Northford, and see if he could do something for us. And he graciously most graciously offered to set up a little website for us. He's gonna do like a Facebook blast and pay $50 out of his pocket to promote our Eat Local, Win Local. And we can put in another $50 as a commission to boost this and see how much we get. Because I really think a professional appearance is something that we might need. Maybe that's what we're lacking. I don't know. But he did the website up so I could take a look at it. I'm very impressed with it. And I'm looking to you for permission to spend $50 to just to promote this, because that's the main part of our budget that we still have about $1,400 left in our advertising and supplies and all that we should spend, because as you all heard, we've got $500 to spend next year, and that's it. We went from a $13,000 budget to a $500 budget. And in my household, it wouldn't make sense to me to spend it all, but when you're dealing with a town, and if you don't spend your budget, they're going to say, they don't really need it, and then they don't give you any more money. So I'm asking for a motion to spend $50 to do this promotion with Be Social Marketing.
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No, thank you very much. Hopefully it'll work. All right, that's all I got. If anybody else wants to say anything, add anything, suggest anything, go for it. It's 8:35. I'm sure none of us expected that we'd be still talking about this, but.
And real quick for our agenda today. I know that we approved the amendment to the agenda, but I don't know if we approved the minutes from.
No, you know what, Naz, I'm going to bring that up at the next meeting, just because this was a special meeting. I'll bring it up at our regular meeting in May. I thought about that too. Excuse me. But we can.
Janet, you have to suspend the vote of the minutes until the next regular scheduled meeting.
Say that again?
You have to suspend the approval of the minutes until your next regularly scheduled meeting.
I suspend approving the minutes from our, April? That was a special meeting too, but anyway, our regular meeting till the next regular meeting in May. Do I have to have a motion for that too?
Yes,
Okay, somebody make a motion.
so moved.
Okay, any discussion?
You need a second.
Any second?
I second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Favor of suspending the minutes to the next meeting.
The last two meetings, so you're going to suspend the minutes from our regularly scheduled meeting.
We didn't have a regularly scheduled meeting. That was a special meeting as well.
Okay, so you have to suspend the minutes from the last meeting and this meeting.
Huh?
No,
Why am I
so
suspending-
understand you.
Why am I
can't-
suspending today's minutes when they haven't been written yet? I don't understand.
Okay, right, you're right. I'm thinking last minute. Okay, I'm just thinking the meeting before. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. All right, if we're all done, I make a motion to adjourn at 8:37.
Is there any public?
Oh. Okay, go ahead, Joe.
I don't, I'll try to make this quick. So, I'd like to thank all of you guys. I think you're doing a great job. You're staying with it. I got a couple suggestions, I guess, for your regular meetings. And for the Mother's Day thing that Laura had suggested doing, you had mentioned that you do have money. Maybe you want to take out an ad in the Town Times about Mother's Day, and to think, to have, people think outside the box, support your local businesses. Yeah. With getting gifts for a mom or something like that. Maybe that would help. The other thing to consider is maybe developing criteria, like a worksheet type of thing for your assessment for boards and commissions, along with businesses that might approach you guys in the future, where a business or the boards and commissions may come, and just like we did with the vineyard, and have a type of worksheet that you work through? How does it impact our community? How does it impact residential neighborhoods, for example, and other items that you could think of so that you have like a consistent evaluation process that you go through? Would be a recommendation maybe for something to be able to work on. And lastly, I'd just like to say, stay safe, and I hope you and all your families are fine through this.
All right, thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I do like the Mother's Day idea for the Town Times.
Okay, I'm going to give you an example. We have to figure out how much we really want to spend, because I thought about advertising Eat Local, Win Local, like in a full page, and it was over $800. So we would have to maybe be able to do like a quarter page or like 2 by 2, I don't know, but we'd have to do something quickly. So if somebody wants to design that, we want to make sure it gets, what's today? Today's Tuesday. So it's not going to get into the paper until next Friday now. And that's the Friday before Mother's Day. So I don't know if that's enough time, to be honest with you.
I think we should push on social.
I agree.
I'm sorry, say that again, I missed it.
I agree with Maggie that it should be push the social media.
Okay.
Just with time, I just think that more people are on their phones these days, and it'll be more broadly recognized, so we can put it in the forums and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we had more time, it would have been, a lot of people aren't on social media, believe it or not. And if we had time to put it in the paper, it probably would have been a good idea. I think their deadline is Monday night at like 5 o'clock to get anything in for the Friday of the same week, if I'm not mistaken. That's why I usually try to get our press releases out to them on a Monday.
I see Joe's point, and I do think it's valid. I think we're up against a time crunch.
Okay. All right, so if Lindsay and Maggie would like to take that on, go for it. I trust you.
Sure. Sure.
All right. Okay, if there's not anything else, I will make a motion to adjourn at 8:41. Do I have it?
Yes, I make a motion.
Second?
I
Are
second.
we all really tired? Okay, we could have been at the Board of Selectmen meeting until God knows when last night, but okay, so all aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 8:41, meeting adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, and be safe, everyone.
Likewise.
You too. Good night.
take care. Bye-bye.